I can't, HBO. I can't. I can't. I can't. I can't. The movie we are talking about today is on HBO Max. That's the third movie in a row we are diving into that's featured on HBO Max. Is this video sponsored by HBO Max? Not yet, but hopefully one day. No sponsorship. However, I do have to get the most out of the streaming services my sister pays for. I'm not opposed to selling out and being a corporate shill for HBO. I have a family I love very, very much, and I want them to have the best things. The best things cost money, so I'm ready to sell out. I'm asking HBO Max to sponsor me, and I'm gonna crap all over this movie right now. Spoilers. I'm watching a lot of HBO Max for two reasons. One, I need to watch a lot of Point Break and The Snyder Cut. Both of those movies are masterpieces. For a straight cisgender female, I'm quite the bro, aren't I? My man! Indeed. And two, HBO Max has a better Latino content section than other streaming services. One day I was browsing the section and I came across a movie called and starring Pancho Villa as himself. I was like, cool, a movie about the great Mexican revolutionary Pancho Villa. Then I saw it stars Antonio Banderas, famous Spanish actor from Spain, Antonio Banderas. Antonio Banderas as Pancho Villa. You're testing me. I nearly threw my computer out the window, and today we are going to talk about why. This video was almost just me driving down to the HBO headquarters and punching some executive in the face. The executive who greenlit this probably doesn't work at HBO anymore, and I would have punched someone that had nothing to do with it. Violence is never the answer. Well, almost never. I still might open up that window over there and yell into the air, Wolverine style. I've watched the movie a couple of times now, and my feelings did change slightly, but that casting choice did not. I've got an entire bottle of margarita mix here, so let's get to it. I won't go into Pancho Villa's whole history in this section. I'll go over the part that is relevant to the movie and this section. If you want a history lesson, I'll leave some links to some other videos and articles about Pancho Villa in the old Carcancha down below. We have to keep in mind there are two Pancho Villas. The real historical figure that did a lot of great things, and the legendary figure that exists only through myths and tall tales. Spoilers, this movie leans in hard into the mythical Pancho and tries to pass it off as historical Pancho. Let's go over some historical material. You guys, I can't get over the fact that Pancho Villa's real name was José Doroteo Arango Arambula. Doroteo, the explorer. That joke was courtesy of my sister. José Doroteo Arango Arambula, better known as Pancho Villa, was born on June the 5th, 1878 in La Coyotada, San Juan del Rio, Durango, Mexico. Pancho became a Mexican revolutionary in 1910, and it lasted until about 1920. Where did the name Pancho Villa come from? There are two theories. One, Pancho had to change his name after killing a Mexican soldier, and Villa was his grandfather's last name. Two, he took some bandit's name just because he liked it. Interesting either way. Pancho was a criminal turned revolutionary. Like many forward thinkers and visionaries, Pancho was radicalized as a teenager and literally fought his whole life against injustice. The biggest injustice in Mexico at that time, and now maybe, was that of class. Famously, Pancho would take away from the rich and privileged and redistribute it to the poor. Pancho would also do what Jesus Cristo told all of us to do and took care of widows and orphans. Taking care of the most vulnerable people while sticking it to the privileged is the main reason why Pancho is such a revered and beloved figure in history. Because Pancho was a true radical, there were a lot of rumors and myths about him. Many of them are not true, but some of them might have actually happened. We don't know for a variety of reasons. All of Pancho's enemies at that time would write and print false information about him. After Pancho died, he was expunged from the historical record in Mexico. Almost everything written about him and his legacy was destroyed. It wasn't until the Mexican Revolution was reanalyzed, starting in the late 1930s with the Mexicayotl movement, did Pancho get a claim as a Mexican hero. Pancho Villa did reach out to Hollywood in 1914 to make a movie about the Mexican Revolution. All the named characters in this movie were real people who were really involved with the making of the real movie that really existed, The Life of General Villa. The movie claims The Life of General Villa was the first feature-length movie ever. Not true. An Australian movie from 1906 called The Story of the Kelly Gang was the first. The Life of General Villa wasn't even the first biopic. The first biopic was the French film Joan of Arc, released in 1900. That film was directed by one of the Millier brothers. The Life of General Villa was released in 1914 and is lost to history. Most of what we know about it comes from the biography of Raoul Walsh, who plays the young Pancho in the movie. That's enough history for this section. A little bit longer than I intended, but I'm not gonna half-ass the history of a revolutionary hero. Next section, please. There isn't a lot of information on how this movie came to be. I'm sure HBO is like, no one noticed this movie. Let's keep it that way. I noticed. And now I'm an alcoholic. Thank you very much for that, HBO. Still down for that sponsorship though. From what information I've managed to find, the main producer of this movie, Joshua D. Maurer, allegedly did extensive research on this historical event. Maurer producer credits include The Last Tycoon and Introducing Dorothy Dandridge. Maurer partnered with legendary producer Mark Gordon, and they sold the idea to HBO. My best guess is that HBO saw the success of the Frida 2002 biopic and thought they have to ride that Latino Hispanic wave that is so hot right now. This was a TV movie, so it's not exactly Oscar bait, but it was Emmys bait. Maurer got writer Larry Gelbart to write the screenplay. Gelbart's most famous works include Tootsie and episodes of MASH. Getting Gelbart to pen the screenplay makes a lot of sense. Get a guy who understands how to depict war on screen in a compelling and complex way. It would have been cool though if they had gotten one Mexican person to be involved with this production. Just one. Maybe then they would have saved themselves some embarrassment. And boy, is there a lot to be embarrassed about here. With a budget of $30 million, HBO shot this film almost entirely in San Miguel de Allende, Mexico. To its credit, the movie doesn't look like a TV movie. It looks like a proper film. $30 million, and they couldn't consult a historian. Shame. They did get Antonio Banderas to star as Pancho Villa, so that makes it worse. Now that we know how we got here, let's take a closer look at what we've got. Usually in this section, I tell y'all the events of the movie. No commentary or jokes. The commentary and jokes are for the review and analysis sections. This movie was so traumatic, however, I'm going to make as many jokes and sarcastic comments as possible. It's the only way to treat a movie like this. Let's do it. Intro card that is letting you know that the following is a bunch of caca. Frank, our avatar, is opening a letter, sees a picture, and holds a necklace of La Virgen de Guadalupe. Flashback to 9 years earlier. A film is being shot in New Jersey in 1914. New Jersey was the film capital of the world. By that time, most productions had moved over to Hollywood, California. Producer Harry Aiken wants to talk to D.W. Griffith, a total film hack, about a new project. We learn our avatar Frank Thayer is Atkin's nephew. Atkin wants movie hack D.W. Griffith to make a movie with Mexican revolutionary Pancho Villa. Frank corrects them about being mestizo. How the hell does white boy from the East Coast Frank know that? Pancho Villa wants to get into the movie business to help fund his campaign against Mexican President Huerta. Pancho asks for $25,000 in gold. Fun fact, $25,000 in 2022 money would be about $709,292. A small fortune, for sure. This project is seen as something that could revolutionize the filmmaking business. At that time, anything and everything could revolutionize the business. It was still in its infancy. A hint of a romance between Frank and actress Teddy Sampson, because no one gay existed at this time. Frank is sent to Mexico to make a deal with Pancho. Frank goes to Presidio, Texas, and meets with Eli Morton. Morton tells Frank tall tales about Pancho, and the lies begin. Frank has to be smuggled into Mexico. See, that's funny because usually Mexican people are smuggled into the US. Mexican hardship. It's comedy gold, Jerry. Frank goes to a rooftop to watch the battle Pancho is in from the roof of his hotel. Fun fact, folks on the Texas side of the border would watch the revolution from rooftops. This was big business for hotels, restaurants, etc. at the time. Frank meets reporter John Reed, who will act as one of the many exposition machines in this movie. Frank and us get the first look at Pancho. The offensive caricature of Pancho Villa they want us to be cool with. Morton lets Pancho know there is a film studio interested. Pancho's men blindfold Frank and take him to meet Pancho. Frank meets Pancho in the shadows. Pancho mentions Charlie Chaplin, even though Chaplin wasn't really a thing yet. Pancho asks to get D.W. Griffith to make the movie, even though Griffith still hadn't made one of the worst and most harmful movies in history, La La Land. I mean, Birth of a Nation, yet. We get the Pancho Villa reveal. Folks, this is brownface. Frank tells Pancho he went to Harvard. Did they teach Chicano studies at Harvard, Frank? Pancho wants his kids to go to Harvard and all other American colleges. Weird thing to say, but okay. Frank gives Pancho the money and Pancho notices something wrong with the contract. Frank takes out his pen to correct the mistake. We see a cartoon-style Mexican standoff. Pancho Villa hater William Randolph Hearst, better known as Citizen Kane, is printing lies about Pancho. Pancho wants to use movies as a way to change public opinion. Pancho in Spanish is short for Francisco. Frank and Pancho have the same first name. They're best friends now. That's cute. Frank clearly has a crush on Pancho. No homo though. They start filming the battle. The battle is intercut with Aiken explaining what and why they are filming down there. Aiken mentions Chaplin, Mary Pickford, and Fatty Arbuckle, who again were not super famous yet, but okay. And I don't appreciate the Mabel Normand erasure. Y'all would be nothing without her. Okay? We see mercenary Sam Drebin in action. Frank observes the horrible price of war. Pancho wants his supporters to be buried with dignity. Ew. Drebin is pulling out dead enemies' gold teeth. That is a real thing that happened. Gold is gold, right, Jerry? A priest impregnates a 14-year-old girl, and Pancho makes him responsible for the baby. Party to celebrate taking that city in battle. Read expositions all of the folks from around the U.S. who are down in Mexico to help aid in the revolution. Pancho takes care of a war widow. Frank wanted to film it, but the moment passed too quickly. Pancho gives Frank his Virgen de Guadalupe necklace. The film is screened for the press. The press makes fun of it. Frank defends the film. Racist reporters make fun of Pancho on film. Frank is fired from his job. Frank gets the idea to make a biopic about Pancho. Aiken agrees to finance this biopic. The movie tells you this was the first feature film. No. Frank goes back to Mexico to pitch the film idea to Pancho. Frank befriends two poor orphan kids. Pancho is taking a hacienda away from Don Luis Terrazas Jr. to redistribute land and money to the poor. Fun fact, Don Luis is played by Pedro Armendáriz Jr. His father played Pancho Villa in a bunch of Mexican films. Frank has a "yes, daddy" moment. Pancho and Don Luis briefly talk about Don Quixote, pointing out how Pancho is an uneducated poor peasant boy. The bromance continues. The line of dialogue that made me lose my mind. Frank speaks Spanish. Reminds me of all the white boys I went out with, trying to impress with their little teeny tiny bit of Spanish they know. Hilarious. Frank pitches the movie idea to Pancho. Pancho rejects it. Pancho asks Frank if they've made a Don Quixote movie. Funny because every time anyone has tried to make a Don Quixote movie, it's been a giant disaster. That book is literally unfilmable. Pancho and his people take over the hacienda of William Benton. They kill Benton. Pancho is painted as a villain for killing Benton. Pancho reads the libel story in the paper. Pancho calls on Frank and Aiken to do the movie deal. They make a new deal and contract. Pancho wants Frank to be in charge of the movie. Pancho is peeing Lyndon Baines Johnson style while conducting business. The peeing is for this handshake gag. Gross. We see the Mexican women keeping the community together by taking care of the kids. Hollywood folks arrive. Samson is here because no homo. Pancho meets the cast and crew. Raul Walsh plays young Pancho Villa. Pancho tests to see if Walsh is man enough to play a young Pancho. Raul gets the Pancho seal of approval. They film the biopic. Everyone boards the train to move to Torreon, Mexico. Pancho hates the screenplay. It is full of lies. This is the most meta and only honest moment in the entire film. Frank asks Pancho if he killed Benton. Frank convinces Pancho to go along with the biopic as written. Filming continues. We see on-set improv. Frank gives Samson a tour of the train. They kiss. Cue 1980s sitcom. Woo! Pancho was able to buy a bunch of French cannons for the war. Pancho films his part of the movie. Pancho is painted white to look better on film. The movie, I think, uses this to point out how film stock was, and still is, designed for white folks only. Pancho gives a good inspirational speech. Cheers and more love from Frank. Frank and Pancho bathe together. Pancho tells Frank how he wants to be buried and remembered. Frank sees whip marks on Pancho's back. Another party before the big battle. Pancho beats Raul at arm wrestling. Frank and Samson continue their pointless love affair. Pancho gives a motivational speech to all the people in his army. Pancho learns all the Hollywood folks are going home and won't be at the battle. As a prank, Pancho pretends to do a firing squad on them. Frank starts to get disillusioned with Pancho. The kids Frank Frank met earlier in the movie are being taken to fight in the war. Frank has to Sophie's Choice the kids to see which one goes to war and which one stays with him. Frank is teaching his kid how to edit film. We see a small glimpse of how important the women were to the war effort. Hell yeah, las Adelitas. Pancho watches her support Huerta in the press. Why do these guys look French? Ew, gross. The French. The train is stopped and ambushed by the Mexican army. The battle begins and Frank films it all. Cool John Wayne cowboy shots all around. Frank celebrates the victory here. Pancho is planning the attack on Torreon. Frank convinces Pancho to attack from the west so they can film it better. Pancho agrees. They march into Torreon. The army can see them clear as day. Frank films the battle. Pancho gives a Braveheart style speech. The battle happens. So much carnage. Pancho's lady is killed. The Sophie's Choice kid is killed. At night, Pancho keeps attacking the military base to Frank's disappointment. They can't film all the cool explosions. Cool explosions sequence. At least he did something right in this movie. Frank sees all the death and aftermath. Pancho sees his lady dead. Don't worry, Pancho. You reportedly had over 70 wives. You'll be okay. Frank's kid sees his brother die on film. Frank visits Drebin in the hospital. Drebin lost his arm in battle. That didn't happen to the real Drebin. Widow asks to speak to Pancho so he can release her husband who was wrongly taken away. His soldiers had just killed her husband minutes before. Frank thinks Pancho will give the widow some money, and now Frank can record it. Woman attacks Pancho. Pancho kills the woman. Frank films the woman being killed. Frank sees the murder and is disgusted. Frank takes off the virgin necklace Pancho gave him and dramatically throws it at Pancho's feet. Pancho tells Frank and the rest of the crew to go home. Cut to May 1914 to the New York City film premiere. Frank slut shames Samson for some reason. We watched the movie. The real movie was an hour and 37 minutes. Audience is shocked by the real war footage. There is an editing choice to present the Mexican army as the ones who killed the widow, not Pancho. The audience loved the movie and Pancho. Reed and Frank talk about the edit and why it happened. Cut to 9 years later. Frank is eating at a deli in New York. Frank sees Drebin and they catch up. Drebin fills him in on the rest of the war. Cut back to the letter Frank was opening at the beginning of the movie. The letter is from the kid Frank saved from becoming a soldier. The kid is all grown up now. Kid tells Frank about the last year of Villa's life. Pancho was the godfather to that kid's kid. Godfather style celebration. Kid gives Frank Pancho's virgin necklace back. We see how Pancho dies, Bonnie and Clyde style. Some fun facts about Pancho after he died. His head was stolen. Allegedly, it's at the Skull and Bone Society at Yale. Frank goes back to Mexico to show people the film. Frank realizes what Lisa Simpson did. A noble spirit embiggens the smallest man. Frank makes peace with Pancho. Montage of Pancho throughout the movie. End of the movie. Finally. It's exhausting. Let's get this, my biggest problem with the movie, out of the way. I read a review from like The Hollywood Reporter or one of those magazines where the critic did not like the movie and claimed the only saving grace is Antonio Banderas and his charm and charisma. I have never read anything so wrong in all my life. Antonio is from Spain, and I know because he speaks Spanish and looks swarthy, you might think he is a Latino. He is not. He is technically Hispanic, but not really. He is from Spain, a country in Western Europe that makes him a white guy. So casting Antonio as Mexican Pancho Villa is whitewashed casting. This is brownface. But he played Desperado. What's the problem with him playing Villa? The problem is that casting should not have happened either. If Antonio was from Mexico, he probably wouldn't be as successful as he is. But because Antonio is from Europe and speaks fancy lispy Castellan, he has a very successful career. Since Antonio isn't Mexican, his portrayal of Pancho is really insulting. Instead of being an inspirational revolutionary leader, Antonio looks and sounds more like the Frito Bandito or Gold Hat yelling,
"We don't need no badges. I don't have to show you any stinking badge."
Or Tuco, aka the Ugly in The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. This portrayal, whether it means to or not, adds to the harmful stereotypes about Mexican people, that Mexican folks are dirty, gross criminals. Plus, this portrayal makes no sense in context of the movie. Frank, and by extension us, are supposed to be inspired to follow Pancho to the ends of the earth, to love and revere him, like so many people did back during the Revolution. This caricature version of Pancho Villa inspires nothing but cringy disgust. Gross. And before some of you start commenting how I'm overreacting, chew on this. What a stink do people put up when it's suggested that, like, James Bond be cast as a non-white, non-British person. But Bond is written to be a debonair British white guy, I hear you say. Yeah, but he's also a fictional character you could do whatever the heck you want with. Villa was a real guy who really existed, so that license to do whatever goes out the window. If there could be so much outrage over the casting of a fictional character, my outrage over the casting of an important historical figure isn't that much of an overreaction now, is it? I would hope a Mexican actor would have given Villa some dignity and respectability. A Mexican actor would have probably not had Pancho refer to himself in the third person so much. That's a white person thing, not a Mexican thing. Also, when Antonio spoke Spanish, you could hear the lispy accent. No Mexican person has a fancy lispy accent when they are speaking, unless they're making fun of a person from Spain. If you know how much Mexican folks make fun of Spanish dum-dums, Manolo y Venancio. Antonio was a bad casting choice. Let's move on to the part that illustrates so clearly all the things that are very, very wrong in this movie. I never thought a couple of lines of dialogue would melt my brain, but here we are. Multiple times while watching this movie, I had to stop it and walk around the room. My emotional reactions manifested themselves physically. So much so, I almost had an aneurysm after these lines of dialogue. The dialogue.
No Spanish, never Spanish. Mexicano. Two things Spain give to my people. The church and the whip.
Oh my God. I can't, you guys. This dialogue is up there with Will Smith in Bright telling us that
fairy lives don't matter today.
Yikes. So, this is wrong on multiple levels. Let's pick out a few. Okay, Pancho telling us that he doesn't speak Spanish, but instead he speaks Mexicano, makes it abundantly clear that this was written by white people. It reminds me a lot of the Fox News type racism, thinking everything south of the border is Mexico. An entire continent and a half worth of culture and people is all Mexico. And racist people yelling at anyone speaking Spanish to stop speaking Mexican, as if Mexican was a language, but whatever. Thanks for letting us all know how racist and stupid you really are. If movie Pancho was ashamed of speaking Spanish, he would have decided to learn one of the many, many native languages of Mexico. Speak Nahuatl, movie Pancho, if you hate Spain so much. Also, having a white man in brown face from Spain speaking that line is so insane to me. For many Spanish folks, they are the only ones who speak proper, correct Castellano. They don't speak nasty, badly spoken Spanish like they do in Latin America. They speak proper de la Real Academia de España Castellano. It's very racist and super classist. The other part of this dialogue is so confusing. Movie Pancho claims that Spain only gave Mexico two things: the church and the women. That comment completely ignores the statement before about language, but sure, Spain only gave two things. Movie Pancho, if you don't like the church, why is that Virgen necklace so important to you? I think it's La Virgen de Guadalupe, which on one hand makes sense. La Virgen Morena helped the Spanish convert a lot of native folks to Catholicism through representation. On the other hand, Movie Pancho is accepting the thing he is critiquing / rejecting, the religion. It's not clear what he is saying with this line. I don't know. If you're rejecting the religion, why is that religious symbol so important to you? I'm very confused. In case you didn't know, Spain brought over no women during the conquest. None. That is why the mestizo folks exist. All the criminals and delinquents that came over from Spain were men. They saw all the beautiful native women in Mesoamerica and decided that race mixing was cool, actually. Native folks were savages until they got boners. Gross. Women and families didn't come over until later, when most of the native folks had died off, and they civilized Mexico by turning Mexico into Spain Jr. Lastly, why is Movie Pancho against the Spanish here? The Mexican Revolution had nothing to do with Spain. The revolution was about class, not race. Problems with the hacienda owners had little to do with their race. Most of them were criollo or mestizo. That means they were not Spanish. The main problem was that they had all the resources and money, while the poorer and lower classes had nothing. The revolution was also about getting corrupt governments out of office. That too has nothing to do with Spain. Movie Pancho, mijo, the conquest was almost 500 years ago. You can't blame them for all the problems in this confusing dialogue. Plus, the Mexicanidad movement is still like 20 plus years away, long after you died. Why is Movie Pancho acting like he started it? This makes no sense. My lunes. After 2 hours of complaining, you might think there is nothing salvageable about this movie. There are a couple of things I did like in this movie. I have to give credit where credit is due. The actor who played Frank, Ian Bailey, was really good. It makes me laugh how there is a whole category of bland, generic, handsome white guys with brown hair, and Bailey falls into that. However, in this movie, he sold being impressed and enamored with Pancho Villa for us, the audience. I didn't have those feelings at all for Movie Pancho, but Movie Frank felt that for me, and it was good enough. I couldn't get it up for Pancho, but Frank got it up for me. And the fact that this movie was through Frank's point of view makes it less of a Pancho Villa biopic and more of a white guy learning surface level things about Mexico movie. I can see why they went with Gelbart to pen this movie. After writing episodes of MASH, who better than Gelbart to show how both exciting and horrifying war is? That aspect of the movie I found very compelling. War is a very complicated topic. Is it necessary? Those who fought in World War II are called the greatest generation. Is that because of the war? War is ugly and glorious, and this movie portrayed both of those things really well. Finally, this movie was made for TV, and it doesn't look like it was made for TV. They spent money on telling the story as well as they could visually. The movie looked really good. Everything looked grand and cinematic. The balance of war being awful, yet awesome, was communicated really well visually. The soldiers looked badass fighting. The aftermath of the war was hideous. If only they could have made Movie Pancho look not so grotesque. Pancho looked more horrible than the images of war. Dang. If they needed a white actor to play Pancho for whatever reason, they could have at least chosen someone interesting. They could have gone with Nick Cage. He would have done the weirdest, most unhinged performance ever, and I kind of need to see that now. My mom suggested Ryan Reynolds, or as she calls him, El Pool. I say,
Now you want to get nuts? Come on, let's get nuts.
if the casting of Pancho Villa happened today and they went with Pedro Pascal or Oscar Isaac, I think either one of those would be fabulous. Neither are Mexican, but those are two excellent Latino actors. I'm sure they would have made interesting choices. Plus, they would have given Villa some much needed dignity. Also, give them a better script. Not this movie's weak script. HBO, I have an idea. We are finally at the end of this video. I never have to think about this movie ever again. Hallelujah. So far, switching over to reviewing movies has been a whirlwind. The Frida biopic was okay. The Selena one was a step up, and this movie rocketed us right to hell. Not the fun, sexy hell with my man's Lucifer, but the real terrible hell where the music is nothing but Coldplay and all the TVs have Friends reruns. That's the worst part of my hell loop right there. While editing this one, I may or may not be eating an entire ice cream cake for my mental health. Anyway, have you guys seen this movie? Am I overreacting? Have you guys heard or learned about Pancho Villa before? Doroteo is still a hilarious name. Leave me any and all comments you have. Thank you for watching, and as always, salud, mi familia.